Hello everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Think Tank. Donald Trump and the 2016 election. Now ordinarily, when I talk about an election, which I did last time, I would just call it the year of the election. But notice how I include Donald Trump in the title. There's a very good reason for that. Because he has gotten so much attention, unlike any other candidate that I can remember. And I've seen a few election cycles happen, but I've never seen a candidate get this kind of attention, this kind of appeal, where what he says matters. And what's really interesting about him, and this is a very important point I want to make, you're only going to hear these points, by the way, at the Think Tank. You're not going to hear these points from the so-called political pundits. If you want to hear information, if you want to know about what's going on, you got to come right here to the Think Tank, and here's where you're going to find that information. Now the point I want to make here is, a very interesting point that's not being made, is that he is getting attention from both sides. He's getting it from the mainstream media, and he's also getting it from the internet. Now if you notice, we've had fringe candidates, so to speak. I guess you can consider him a fringe candidate because of the fact that he has no political experience, where he's from, how he handles himself. He's a different type of guy. And fringe candidates could be Tea Party guys, libertarians, things like that, independents. And if you notice, they get a lot of appeal on the internet, but you hardly see them on the mainstream media. But Trump is getting it both ways. He's getting a lot of appeal on the mainstream media and a lot on the internet. I mean, if you look at his interviews on the internet, he has so many views. And then you look at the other candidates, I mean, hardly anything. It's like they don't even matter. So that's a very important point right there. Here's another important point. Donald Trump is doing something in politics that has never been done in U.S. history. I really want you to listen to this. This is very important. He has no political experience. Now, there have been other entrepreneurs in the past, but not with his type of work background. This is a guy who's a real estate developer. He's not a guy who used to be on Wall Street or finance or something like that, even tech stuff. He is a real estate developer. This is a strictly private sector type of thing. No political experience, comes in from this kind of background into politics. Now this, years and years ago, would not be appealing because people think, oh, experience, you need experience. Experience? What kind of experience? Good experience or bad experience? A career criminal can have experience. But is that good experience? Is that a reason why somebody like that should be elected to a public office? What kind of experience? What experience have we had? So when you say experience, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Now, what's really interesting is entrepreneurs with no political experience haven't done that well in the past. Ross Perot, I would say, is one guy that comes to mind. He got appeal, but how much? Not enough. Now, why is Donald Trump getting so much appeal? Well, think about it. Americans aren't the brightest bunch. I would say around the world, they're probably amongst the dumbest. And why is that? Because they never learned their lesson. I mean, my goodness, how many election cycles have we had where politicians promise things, they get into office, and they don't come through? I mean, I would say it happened at least in the last 6, 7 election cycles. I'm talking about presidential election cycles, not two-term presidents. I'm talking about every president. I would say 7, maybe 8. Now, if you look back, what did they do? They promised stuff, right? Whatever it may be. Democrats, Republicans, they promise stuff. People believe it, they go out and vote. I mean, to actually go out of your way to vote, it's something you have to do, it takes time. You have to be passionate enough to think that the person you're voting for has merit and they're going to do something. And what happens? They don't come through. None of them came through on their promises. None of them. All right? Even the best of them. Even the best of them, if you think back, they haven't come through. So let me give you an analogy. You go to a restaurant, the food's no good, right? Will you go back a second time? Maybe. You go back a second time, the food's even worse. Would you go back a third time? Probably not. But there's a chance, if you don't have another restaurant to go to, right? If you don't have a choice, you go back a third time. The food is even worse than the second time. Would you go back now? I would say no. You wouldn't. But with Americans, right? These genius Americans, what do? They keep coming back for more. It's not 3 times, it's at least 6, 7 times. So are they finally getting it through their thick skulls to say, you know what? They're not going to change anything. Maybe we should vote for a guy that's not a politician. Maybe somebody coming outside the political system will be able to do something. Now along comes a guy named Donald Trump. Now there are some other people. There's still, I think there's one other candidate that has no political experience that's still in the race for the Republican nomination. But if you really look towards the beginning, the ones that didn't have political experience were amongst the leaders. That's very interesting. I can't remember that happening before. And now there's still 2 left, despite the narrowing field. Now, if you think about that, that's very important. Maybe Americans are finally getting it. I mean, how long does it take? You know, if you listen to my analogy, my goodness. It's the politicians that are the problem. Hello? Wake up. Wake up, dopey Americans. All right? Mr. Joe Sixpack, wake up. Maybe it's the politicians that are the problem. So maybe they're finally getting it right. Now, what's interesting about Trump is he's able to expose this. He makes it so easy that even the dumb American can understand it. He's saying, look, you pull your strings, right? And they do what you tell them. You got to give them money. And that's what he's been doing. Because you can't get anything done in the real estate business, especially New York City. Talk about a nanny city, all right? You're talking about huge, big government. You know, the government's going to take care of you, and then, of course, what they're going to do is create all these ridiculous laws to make it impossible to have any prosperity. So what do you have? You have in front of you, when you're looking to put up a building in Manhattan, well, you have the EPA, you have the Department of Buildings, you have HUD, you have all kinds of other permits that you need for water, for electricity. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's not just the money you need to get everything you need, it's the time. In real estate, time is a real enemy because when you buy something, you have all kinds of expenses. I mean, you have interest to pay on loans. You have your money tied up into this property and it's waiting there until you get your permits. I mean, zoning laws, it's unbelievable. It's so difficult. You know, I spoke to someone from China. They said, you want to put up a building in China? You just do a little work, whatever it is. You have to get certain things you need and it just goes up. I mean, it's quick. and that's supposed to be a communist country. And the United States is a capitalist country. Come on. So what does he do? He works with the politicians. He has to work with them. He has to get what he can out of them, and he has to give them something so they will give him the things he needs. He shouldn't have to do that. He should be able to be prosperous. He worked hard. He should be able to build. He should be able to grow and succeed. And that's going to create jobs. He's going to be able to be successful, but the government is holding him back, so he has to work with them. And it's amazing how these political hacks are attacking him, and they're saying, oh, you know, you had Clinton go to your wedding. Well, you know, she was a politician in New York. He had to work with them. That's what he says. That's the point. That's the point. He had to, because he has to get things done. So he said nice things about them, and he was friendly with them. And that's what he says. I get along with everyone. That's what he says. That's the whole point. He does it because that's the only way, and it shouldn't have to be that way. And that's what he's trying to tell people. He says, look, you can get whatever you want out of these politicians. They're corrupt, they're money hungry, they're liars. And the other thing about him is he's bulletproof because he has no political record. So if you notice, they attack each other. You know how it is with the debates. They attack each other's records. You supported socialized medicine. You supported higher taxes. Where you were the politician, people lost their jobs. You support abortion. Because they're politicians, they're lawmakers. But he's not. So what are they going to hit him on? Right? I mean, Bush tried to hit him with bankruptcy. Bankruptcy? The guy is worth over $4 billion. I should be so bankrupt. A man that's worth that kind of money? He just let go of businesses that didn't work anymore. He used the laws to get rid of certain businesses. He doesn't just own one business. He never went bankrupt. He's worth billions of dollars. I mean, what did he ever do? He attacks Trump, but what did he do in the private sector? Did he ever succeed? Did he ever do anything on his own to become successful? What did he succeed with? And he attacks him for that. I mean, it made him look even worse. Now, what's really interesting is, despite all this, it just goes to show how stupid and how idiotic Americans are. I mean, like I said, 6, 7 election cycles, and if you notice, even when they have proven to be corrupt and they contradict each other and they're exposed as liars and scoundrels, if they give a speech, oh, I'm tough on terror, I'm going to bomb the terrorists, we're going to be the strongest military, they still get a chair. And this happens even after they get booed. I mean, it's like a thief who commits theft, right? And everyone knows about it, and then he starts giving speeches about you not stealing and be moral, and then, they're going to cheer for him. It's the same thing. Why are you cheering for these people? A bunch of stupid lemmings. And that brings me to the other point about Trump, what he said about the people that booed him. This is incredible. This is also something that never happened in politics before. He has attacked an entire crowd of people. And he totally owned them. It was amazing. I mean, who would have the courage to do that? Because you need the crowd. You want to get the loud pops, right? You say something that makes good politics and you get a nice chair. He attacked a whole crowd of people. He accused them of being lobbyists and special interest groups. It was incredible. And they can't say anything about it. The boos eventually die out because they say, oh yeah, he's right, we are. He says, I'm a self-funder. You can't argue with that. He is. He's a billionaire. So it's very hard. I mean, they have nothing. And let me tell you something. I think the media is making this look a lot closer than it is. I think he's way ahead of the polls. I think he's way ahead in what the polls show. I think he is crushing his competition. He's flattening them. Maybe they're just making it look closer because they want people to pay attention, but I think he's way ahead. I think, unless somebody else comes into the race that's maybe a non-politician, that's outspoken, that has appeal, I think he's going to become the nominee by a landslide. As far as the Democrats, I really don't know. They're in a lot of trouble. I mean, it doesn't look like they have anybody that's a clear-cut winner. I mean, I think the leading candidate right now is an outspoken socialist. I mean, that's how off the deep end the Democrats have gone. And let me tell you something, unfortunately we're headed that way. But I think the tipping point that Hamilton and Jefferson spoke about is not quite there yet. So a socialist still scares a lot of Americans. Therefore, it's likely that he just might win the whole thing. Because like I said, as far as the Republicans are concerned, I just don't think anyone can come close. I think there are some candidates that have enough money to go to the end, but the reality is you have to get the votes. And I think the guy with the most money behind Trump is Bush. Bush has a lot of money. I mean, he's not going to go away that quickly. He's got a lot of money. But it's only going to get you so far. So did Ross Perot, right? He had a lot of money too, but it only gets you so far. So, I mean, that's really where it goes. Now, as far as Trump, I don't support Trump. I don't support him. There are things that he says that I do not agree with. I think some of his solutions are going to make things worse. For example, when he says China is ripping us off, I don't think so. I don't think they're ripping us off. I think we're ripping ourselves off. I mean, to a certain extent, they rip off, but not to the extent of what he's saying. He's saying there is a $500 billion trade deficit, but that's our fault. What we have here is stagnation. We support labor unions, minimum wage, all these anti-discrimination laws, labor laws, all right, regulation. All this stuff just makes things more expensive. And they don't have stuff like that there. They're able to produce a product at a much lower cost. They have hardworking people. The people that work there, they sleep in their workplaces. They work hard. You know what China looks like now? It's the US in the rearview mirror. We used to be like that. We used to make the things that they're making. They have prosperity. That's why we have a trade deficit. It's not a matter of ripping off. In order to get prosperity, you should look at the things that they're doing. All right? So it's not a matter of that. And then he wants to put up a wall. I mean, with Mexico, that's not going to help. Because if things get really bad, what if people want to get out, right? Think about that. So, putting up a wall. The best wall to put up is to stop giving away all the goodies from the taxpayer, right? The free healthcare, the free education, food stamps, government aid, all this stuff that the taxpayer has to pay, all right? If you have incentives, they're going to come here. This is what it's about. That's the problem with immigration. It's not the wall that's going to stop them. All right? What it really is the incentives. That's the problem. I'm an open borders guy. I think we should let people come in. But unfortunately, we don't live in a free society with a non-aggression principle. We have government that's going to let the people in and then take our money and give it to them. That's the problem here. So it's not the wall. I think Trump's heart is in the right place, but the immigration should be based on taking the incentives away. Now, he also supports Social Security. Social Security cannot be supported. It's a disaster. Social Security needs to be abolished. It was created based on a current administration. He knew that he wouldn't have to worry about it. It's going to basically implode way after he's out of office. That's why FDR started it. He knew all these things were not going to work. It would be unsustainable. But that's what politicians do. They make laws, they create programs, knowing that when the thing falls apart, they're not going to be in office anyway. It's going to fall on somebody else's lap. And right now, the chickens are coming home to roost. It's broke. The people first paying into it are making money. But the new people, the jobs aren't there. And here's the other problem with Social Security that people don't talk about. They say inflation is about 2% per annum. I think it's higher than that. Now, people that are paying in during their work years, when they turn 65, they're going to be paid back in inflated currency. And who knows what's going to happen in the future? The economy is getting rapidly worse. They can be paid back with hyperinflation currency. So the money that you paid in, you're barely going to get back. That's another problem with Social Security. Inflation. It's better to have the money now. At least the money now will be worth more than the money in the future at the current pace of inflation. Something people don't talk about. So that's another thing. And healthcare. Healthcare, I don't agree with what he says about healthcare. Healthcare has to be taken out of government hands. It has to be 100% in the private sector. 100%. Because we can't pay it. We're broke. And the other thing about the debt, all the politicians talk about this. The 19 trillion in debt. But listen, you got to explain it so that even the dopey American can understand. Because Americans love debt. When you say 19 trillion, they say, oh, it's government. No, it's not. It's your debt. But they don't think about that. Americans love debt. Everything's on the credit card, right? The car payment on the credit card. The house payment on the credit card. The food bill on the credit card. The utility bill on the credit card. People love debt. They embrace it. Oh, pay it back. Pay back the interest. Pay off one credit card with another one. Consolidate, right? You can't explain it that way. You have to explain it so that even the dopey American can understand. You have to tell them, you know what's going to happen? You continue to borrow from the Chinese, the Saudis, the Brazilians, all our creditors. You continue to borrow from them. One day, they're going to come to this country. They're going to say, you have no hope to pay this back. When things really get bad, we're taking your house. This is what they can do. They can come to this country and say, you owe us this money. We're taking your house. Here's the bill. It's 19 trillion now. Who knows? Maybe soon it'll be 50 trillion, 60 trillion, who knows? You have to give us your house. We're foreclosing. What do you do then? This is a reality. This is what you really have to tell Americans. Maybe then they'll get it. You can't just say 19 trillion. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. You have to look at the unfunded liabilities. I mean, if you really look at the whole debt, it's much, much worse. I'm a math guy, and I can tell you. You're looking at about 1/3. Because basically, they say over 90 million people are unemployed, right? And You have a population of about 300.5 million people, whatever it may be. So it's almost around 100 million, something like that. You have about almost 100 million people unemployed. So you're talking about almost a third of the country that is unemployed. So 2/3 are basically supporting with their productivity one entire third. That's unbelievable. Now, of course, you can't include children and elderly, but it makes no difference. It's all numbers. Everybody has to live. So the ones receiving the support is still the amount of people. There's a huge amount of unemployment here. All right? I mean, we could be talking about north of 20%. I mean, that's worse than the Great Depression. So that's very, very bad. And then you look at all the unfunded liabilities. There's over $100 trillion. Talking about everything: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, healthcare, the whole thing. And look at our GDP, it's ridiculous. I think around 17% of the GDP is healthcare. Healthcare is not productivity. You're not making anything, it's a service. You know, we have the cart before the horse type of economy, where we have the service sector leading, right? But manufacturing is lagging. It has to be the opposite. You can only service goods. You can't service nothing, right? You have to have goods and service them. So what are we doing? We're servicing other countries' goods. It's not sustainable. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, I agree with what he's exposing. And I agree, and hopefully he'll do something about it if he becomes president, is the corporate tax is a disaster. We're losing so many jobs. I totally agree with that. I was following the whole Pfizer thing. I mean, they're a big company. For them to leave and go offshore because the taxes are so unbearable. So maybe there's some things that he will do that are good. So I'm not supporting him. I don't support Trump. And I certainly don't support anyone else that's standing up there. I can tell you that much. But one thing I do support him with is that he's really exposing these politicians for what they really are. No one has done that before. It's really impressive. So I'm not voting for him. I don't support him. I mean, he's not talking about the things that I want to hear, but I do support him in the context of what he's doing with politicians. Even if he's not elected, he has done already something that has never been done in the history of U.S. politics. He's exposed these politicians for what they are. And as far as the election, I mean, just look at the ratings. When he's in the debates, huge ratings. When he's out of the debates, who wants to watch them? So he makes great theater, he's very entertaining. And Americans love that. We know how Americans are. I mean, with them it's, you know, with the debates, it's reality television, but he makes it interesting. Before, who would watch it? It's boring. It's the same stuff over and over again. Oh, I cut taxes. I created jobs, right? Meanwhile, you have to fact check all that stuff. What about the jobs that were lost, right? Do they count those? I'm not even going to get into it. It's ridiculous. But anyway, I would like for you to join the discussion. And I would like to see your comments. What do you think about the 2016 election? What do you think about Donald Trump? What do you think about the other candidates? Please leave your comments. Please like up this video. Please subscribe. And thank you for tuning in.